Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a game from the second round of the FIDE Candidates Tournament taking place in Ekaterinburg in Russia at the moment. And it's between the pre-tournament favourite, Fabiano Caruana, and he's playing white against the wildcard Kirill Alekseenko. And both players drew in the first round. So we had d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, allowing the Nimzo-Indian, bishop to b4, and now straight away a sort of aggressive, super sharp move at f3, intending to capture the centre. So we have d5, a3, bishop back to e7, and now e4, de5, d takes e4, f takes e4, and now c5. The main line is e5. In fact, c5 is played, very, very rarely. So we had d5, ed5, ed5, castles, and now bishop e2, which probably is a new move trying to stop black, gaining a sort of ideal setup straight away with bishop to g4. So he sort of spent a move on rook e8, which isn't necessarily what you would want to do straight away. Because if you play your other developing move, knight d7, then white gets what he wants, which is he stopped the bishop coming straight out to here. So we had rook e8, knight f3, so bishop g4, castles for white, knight d7, and now d6, which is a very double-edged move because pawn's either strong or weak here. Now it lacks the defense of a fellow pawn, but this was all part of Caruana's pre-game preparation. So we had bishop f8, and again he played this very quickly, h3, bishop h5, and now knight b5. Straight away, threatening to fork the two rooks, and poses a concrete problem to his young opponent. So Fabi mentioned after the game that rook b8 and queen b6 he thought were the two most likely moves, but Alekseenko, he sank into thought for some half an hour or so here and came up with an interesting defense, rook e6. Now, well, the first point, of course, you can't play knight c7 because then rook d6 hits the queen, and then white would have to play here to avoid losing the knight. But bishop f4 strengthens the pawn, and still there's a threat of knight to c7, but this is the idea was a6 anyway, knight c7, and now rook e4, hitting the bishop. So if we take here, then rook f4 can be fine for black because the knight then has to retreat anyway. And something like knight b6, black can take on d6, and then the knight would have to come here, and black could capture, forcing white to capture with a pawn on d5, which isn't it's not what white wants to do. He wants to keep this square open for a piece. So we had bishop h2, and now the rook moves to safety on c8, and now again another sharp move, g4. So black, he felt forced to capture on g4 here, because if bishop g6, white can do something like bishop to d3, still harassing the rook, and notice that white's still got this solid protection of his pawn, which is the bastion of white's play, really sort of cuts black into two almost. So after rook e3, we've got bishop g6, hg6, and then white could play queen d2, hitting the rook again, which sort of keeps having to move. So rook e4. Now you could play rook d1 perhaps, or simply just b3, protecting the c4 pawn, and then white has knight g5 in the offing with a sort of a strong attack, really. So in the game, we had bishop takes g4, sacrificing a piece, hg4, knight g4. So now he's opened up the white king, but you wouldn't expect really that it's enough for the piece, because he's got 2 pawns for the piece, and white's hanging on to this one, but he's hoping that with the threats of knight e3 or knight h2 to weaken the pawn, and then he gets 3 pawns for the piece instead of just 2. So Caruana played bishop to d3. We had knight h2, so he's going to capture this rook. Bishop e4, knight takes f1, queen takes f1, and now bishop d6. So in the interview after the game, Caruana mentioned that this very natural looking move, but he seemed to think this was a slight mistake, and it was better to play knight f6 straight away. And the line he then gave after that was rook e1, and after queen d6 there's the retreat knight d5. So White's then hoping for this, which he said was then very good for White, because the bishop's now on a fantastic diagonal, and f7 is weak, and the opposite bishops make it easier for White to attack. I mean, there's threats like knight g5 here. Sorry, perhaps knight e5. And instead of knight d5, the line that Fabi mentioned was knight e4, rook e4. White's got 3 pawns, a piece for 3 pawns, which, but he said the main reason he thought it was good for White is the strong knight on d5. And he also pointed out that queen g6 runs into queen g2, queen e4, and now knight f6 would win the queen. So, and he said that after this, that due to the strong knight here, that this eventually should be fruitful for White, just to keep playing on this endgame. So in the game we had this move, bishop takes d6, knight to d5, and now g6, sort of blunting the power of the bishop, which no longer is attacking the h7 square. And we had queen h3 and king g7. We had king h1 making way for the rook to come to the g line. Knight e5, and now the sort of counterintuitive knight here, but Caruana is intending to sort of bring the rook here, and then sort of intending moves like knight f5, or perhaps sacrificing on the g6 square. So Alekseenko played this, hoping to naturally try and block the file with the knight on g4. We had rook g1, and we had bishop f8. If he tries knight g4 in this position, then knight f5 is a strong reply, as Caruana mentioned after the game. The nice line with king g8, and then rook g4, hg4. Queen h6 is very powerful because there's a threat to mate here, and if you play, well, you can't play queen f8 first because of knight f6 is checkmate straight away. If you play bishop here, then this knight checks on e7, knight d to e7. You can't capture that with the bishop because it's still mate. And if you capture with the queen, well, you're losing your queen, but also White can play bishop g6, and after takes, which is forced due to the threat of queen h7 and f7 mate, and then White can win the rook. For example, check, queen h5 check, king moves to the g file, queen g4, then we can capture on c8. So after this, you could also try bishop to e5, but then because that protects g7, but then simply knight here wins. It checkmates anyway because you've got to give your queen up. Knight e7 is mate. And if you play g takes f5, which is the only other move, then we've got bishop f5. And now the point now is we're threatening threatening queen h7 and then queen h8 mate, because the knight's covering the e7 escape square. So if black now plays, well, we're threatening knight f6 as well. We're threatening a few things. One of them is to play bishop check, king h8. Well, we're threatening to play bishop here, king here, this sort of famous mate with the queen and bishop, queen h7, king here, queen f7 mate. So if you need to prevent that, you could try bishop e5. Sorry, the other threat's knight f6, but that's why, in order to stop knight f6 winning the queen and winning the game, you would have to play this, and then you run into the mate that I just showed, that we've just seen. So in the game, I didn't play knight g4, played knight bishop back to f8. Then we had knight f4. Again, he's threatening knight here. There's simply too many white pieces near the king here. There's 5 pieces are sort of bearing down. The 2 knights are right in the face of the king. There's the rook here and the queen, and there's only really sort of 1, 2, 3 defenders. So it's the lines tend to work if you've got too many pieces attacking, and the opposite bishops just serve to make it even worse for black. So he played knight g4. If you try and get out of the way of the attack with king h8, white can now sacrifice on g6 anyway. Knight takes g6, knight takes g6, and now it's just a simple mate with queen h5 check, as I'm sure you can see, and just simply mating along the g file, or queen h7 is mate. So king h8 doesn't work. So in the game, Alekseenko tried knight g4. This ran into knight h5, gh5, and now bishop f5. So the main threat now is to capture this, and the king quickly gets mated. And if black tries to run away with king f6, then it's not surprising you're not going to survive with a move like that. But rook f1 is strong, and now the king needs to retreat to either e7 or g7. If you play king e7, we can play takes, queen e3 check, and now king d6 would run into rook d1, winning the queen, and king d7 would run into, probably among other things, rook f7. Now king c6 would, you're just going to quickly get mated here. King's having to run all the way from where it was all the way to the queen side. So white could mate with this, b3 takes, and then queen a1, almost like a sort of a Morphy game almost. So after king f6, rook f1. There's also king g7 as a move, but then bishop g4, hg4 in order, otherwise black's just a piece down and losing anyway. Queen g4, and then after king h6, we can play knight f5 check, forces king h7, queen h5, king g8, and now rook g1, just a simple mate. Bishop g7, rook g7, king f8, and queen h8, because the knight cuts out the escape of e7. So the lines are often very easy like this once you've got a very powerful knight on the wonderful f5 square. So in the game, we have bishop e7, and now bishop takes g4. If we take the knight, there's bishop c8 check with a rook up, and after h takes g4, we have queen g4 check. So we can't come to h6 because then just a simple mate on either queen h5 or queen g7. But this was the position in the game, and instead of queen g5, which Caruana could have played, he actually played queen h5, and because he just wants to carry on the attack with rook g5, and it's going to be a quick checkmate again. And in this position, Alekseenko resigned the game. Because if he plays the only move to safeguard his bishop with f6, then we can play knight f5 check, and now after king f8 we can play queen h8 check, forcing king f7, queen h7. No, we can't play king e6 because rook e1, because notice the knight's protected, bishop being their only move is checkmate. If you play king f8, it's something similar, queen g7, king e8, rook e1, bishop e3, rook takes e3, queen e7, and queen e7 mate. So Caruana gets himself off to a good start in the tournament, really. He drew in the first round, he was pushing MVL with black, and he's now in a shared lead after 2 rounds with the 2 other winners from round 1, which was who were Wang Hao and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Nepomniachtchi drew with Grishuk in a Berlin, and he didn't really get anywhere in the endgame. And Wang Hao drew, he actually had a very strong position against Shuri, but Shuri defended stoutly and managed to hold. And Ding, incredibly, lost again. He looks unrecognisable. It's difficult to know what's happening. And he's incredibly started off with 0 out of 2. But today, in the next round, he's going to face Caruana with white. So it might be his chance, if he can possibly win that game, to get back to within half a point of Caruana, who's according to the ratings, most likely winner of the tournament. So I hope you enjoyed that game, and thank you for watching. If you did enjoy it, please thumbs up and subscribe would be great. Thanks for watching. Bye now.